Welcome back to House Education, Tuesday, March 31st. The committee is continuing to discuss its required CISA map and its guidance for districts. We're feeling okay for the moment on the CISA lines that we have.
Yeah.
I appreciate people's input and the changes that occurred from them in our work. I think for sort of some of these outstanding kind of discussions on the guidance map, that might have us just sleep on it. But we can't sleep on it too much because we do need to have a bill out. All right, getting back to the discussion on CISAs, the areas that we have missing in our language are what school districts are assigned to the CISA and what how much money to put up front. We had testimony from the Vermont Learning Collaborative CISA, if you recall, and they said, you know, there's the $10,000 grant that's already existing in state law, and then they talked about $5,000 startup cost. That seems a little low to me. I'm not sure about everybody else. So I think, but anyway, that gives us, we are looking currently at having 7 CISAs. So that's 35,000 for those startup costs. Again, I think that that's low. That cost does not include, we don't make it, it's not mandatory necessarily in the election, I don't think, the cost of hiring an executive director. That would be paid for by the membership of the CISA. When we're ready to make that. So we need to pick lines, we need to pick numbers. So do people have anything they'd like to weigh in on that?
Well, weren't the costs also, I'm going back to the presentation we got on March 19th from our existing one, the $10,000 grant for development.
Right. Which is in law.
But then they had listed out 200,000 for salary and benefits.
Yes.
I didn't hear that number here.
No, what I said was that, you know, we are mandating the creation of the CISA, but we're not necessarily, we need to let counsel on this, but we're not necessarily mandating when they hire and who pays for the executive director.
No, I don't. Well, we need to pick the executive director if we don't want an unfunded mandate. No.
Well, I mean, a CISA is going to be an unfunded mandate.
Well, question.
But hopefully it'll be one that pays more than pays for itself.
I guess the initial hire.
Yeah.
The ongoing then would be.
Do we need to hire the executive to pay for the executive or the facilitator?
We're paying for the
Well, sorry,
facilitator. Yeah. Leland?
I was just going to ask for examples of what the expenses would be, but I can see that it would be for personnel mostly.
Yeah, I mean, so what they gave us was the initial phase of program development could be covered by the $10,000 BOCES grant program that we have. Now that needs to be, since it's mandatory, it needs to be funded fully. So I think there's 70 right there. Then they said startup, consultation, membership fees, all that, 5,000. And then, but what that leaves out is the hiring of the initial executive director. Maybe we could do a 50-50. I would just remind us that there's a lot of money appropriated and set aside for education transformation, $4 million, not all of which was appropriated. And even what was appropriated can be appropriated to this work as well.
There's a little bit left from the redistricting. I think it's like 60,000 or something. Is there anything left in the commission fee?
I don't
The
know.
large.
No, we didn't, yeah, we didn't spend that much. I don't know how much we were appropriated.
So I recognize that there was a very grassroots startup of the current CISA. But when they became or chose to really get organized enough and then look at BOCES model and decide to hire an executive director, I don't want to, they would have to tell us exactly how much each SU who participated had to kick in at that, when they became a member
Yeah.
officially, but it wasn't overwhelming even for, because there were so many of us, there were 8 of them, and you know, you can, there's 10, 15 grand each, and you can get up to quite a higher number, and so I'm not as hung up on the executive pay for the executive director. I do want to make sure that, because there was a growth process that the first CISA was, they were already collaborating when they, in that same model. And that there may be additional costs of trying to pull together a CISA of multiple supervisory unions and supervisory districts that have not worked together. And so we should really be thinking very seriously about that part of it, less I think about the executive director, because if you're going to use it, you're going to have to buy in. So, I mean, we're seeing benefits from buying in.
We could. We could, for the first year, we could cover half.
I just think some kind of seed money for that effort, especially if our goal is quick, is.
Yeah.
Part of the.
So is it an estimate then of, would it be 700,000?
Yeah, 100,000 each.
I just think some, it has to be like 50 each, like it's gotta be something that's substantive enough to start. I don't know. It matters if it's 100, it's 50, but
Yeah.
Maybe a number of people could live with a little more comfortable.
sure.
I mean, do we just have to think about when in the budget cycle for school districts, they would be
That's
able to
part of it
build
too,
in
right?
that,
So that's why. I
that
like
buying in
yeah.
cost, so.
So what I would, as I was sort of thinking about this, what I would foresee potentially is, well, there's no mandate that anybody hires an executive director right away, but we could say that, when they are feeling up and ready enough to do that, there would be a $50,000 startup grant for hiring the first executive director. Something like that. But to get a little more clarity from Ledge Council about sort of what's required and what's not. So that would be, essentially, if everybody took advantage of it, you'd have $70,000 in BOCES grants. That's 7 BOCES. Well, we call them BOCES grants now. Maybe 7 CISAs. Take advantage of that to do articles of agreement. Then another 5,000 each based on just what we got from BTLC. So you
Could
get,
come from like redistricting task force.
Sure. yeah. So that'd be another 35, so you're up to 105. And then first year executive director, those BOCES are ready to. That's another 350. I suspect that money is available. The agency may not be terribly happy, but it's not necessarily for them. The 350 would probably stay with them. Well, it all would. And they would throw it out as things come online.
We've had a facilitator conversation around facilitating conversations around redistricting. But I'm also wondering whether there could be a resource for new CISAs with a facilitator type thing to help set them up. Like 2 or 3 people, you know,
So-
who could,
So in the presentation that we had from VTLC, in the startup cost, they said consultation and membership from national organization, $5,000. Then consultation offered by VL.
Yep.
C. VTLC.
I keep mixing up with VLCT.
Yeah, it's really very confusing.
So I think what that to me, that implies that they're ready to be consulting. You know, because what you're saying is there needs to be a resource out
I
there.
really think there needs to be one. And however, I'm not suggesting what it should be, but I think there needs to be, because again, the other one was very organic and lasted like, we
Right.
started like 7 years or something before.
I mean, we could say that's part of the $5,000 startup cost that's being estimated here. And there's no requirement who they get that help from.
I guess I'm just not sure that would get them off the ground. I saw where it got ours off the ground. I'm not sure. And I'm not saying it wouldn't, but I
Yeah.
just feel like
Well-
the part of getting the CISA up and operational is critical.
Yeah.
And I don't mean just an executive director. I mean collaborating, getting together, becoming a unit.
Right.
And there needs to be support and help for that. And I get all of what they said and agree with that. I'm just not sure. In a short time frame, whether it's
Open to suggestions as to what that could be.
Oh, I had a question. Would one thing to consider be, is there a way we can create a little capacity in our existing CISA specifically to do this work around helping the other CISAs across the state get up and off the ground? I mean, they're sort of the holder of the contract for the facilitators, but is there a way to sort of build in that support for like CISA initial implementation?
I don't know the answer to these questions.
No, it's,
I mean, you're essentially saying the same thing.
I think I am saying the
But,
same thing.
but you're being very specific around it, and that's fine. I'm just don't.
I'm just wondering in my own head, like what, and this is a
So
oversimplification.
these are
Yeah.
questions that need to be answered. I
Yeah,
can't answer them.
okay.
And we've got time. We don't have time.
I
Yeah.
was just gonna say, what?
So that's our struggle. So whatever resources people can bring to bear to answer these questions so that we can actually have a bill
Mhm.
would be great.
Question on the appropriations piece again. So have you put in there yet paying for the facilitator?
No, that's the other,
Separate.
that's the other, we haven't even talked about the facilitator money.
Okay.
So broad strokes here on numbers, it's. Well, I guess we don't need to do anything for the 10K each, right? Because that's an existing law.
I don't know if it's
Okay.
appropriated.
Okay.
That would need to be appropriate.
I guess on the whole, we're looking at about 500,000, right? A little under, more
Yeah.
like 55, but,
Yeah.
you know, if we want to deal in somewhat round numbers. And so if you say 500,000, and take out what's left of redistricting task force, and if anything is left from the commission, and then from there. The AOE implementation,
Right. Now, the facilitators are a whole other,
right,
That's
right, that's.
and it's a pretty
This is
hard
the
one.
second one.
And the facilitators are a little hard one to, they're a little bit hard to sort of calculate. Because, for example, up in the Chittenden County area, we're not really talking about much in the way of merging. So it'd be good to have the conversations. And in other places, you know, I think that there is going to be a hard look at it and a no, which means there wouldn't be much need for a facilitator after that. But maybe we should just go with optimism and say it would be yes. Maybe we'll ask around about some consulting numbers and bring them back to the table. Forward with that.
just got some preliminary information from the School Boards Association going back to Act 46, so obviously prices have changed. That it was like 150 an hour was sort of the rough. Now, how many hours, that's it. And then going way, way back to Act 153, districts were reimbursed up to 20,000 in legal and consulting services. It's also a transition grant.
Also, in the process, you wonder, I mean, a facilitator is only going to get paid $50 work the facilitator
Right.
does. So if the process, if they go, we want to be inadvisable, that it kind of stops. Have to write a report. Other areas, I think a facilitator brings everybody together, helps them have the conversation, but at a certain point, they almost take over themselves. So $50,000 per facilitator.
That's what we had in Act 46. I remember the grant was 150, you got 50 up front. And if you were successful, you got the extra 100. But the 50 was for the facilitator costs and the legal and all what you just described. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. It was 150, but 50 was for going through the process.
Right, but we're talking about a facilitator who would be trying to manage multiple
Understand that.
study committees.
And we're talking technically.
They worked in commission, the more they got to.
Hilarious.
All right,
But I mean, do we have, like, is there a way to set an overall amount, but not, like, it's just gonna vary widely. Some places are gonna use, if it's hourly, I mean, heck, they might even need to more than one in some places, or there might not be as much. Like, can we just sort of set an overall pot and let that be worked out with, like, I don't know how, I don't think we're HR here.
right,
It's
right. So
kind of
we would be,
pretend, but-
so we would be, remember, we would be appropriating it to the Vermont Learning Collaborative,
Right,
whose job it would be to hire, train the facilitators, send them out, supervise them. They're going to want that piece of the action too, doing that. Yes. Let's maybe return to that. We gotta change gears here in a second. All right, why don't we break here?